Tonight on Bridge City News, airline passengers will now be compensated financially if their flights are cancelled or luggage is lost. We have the details. The town of Coaldale is looking for more public input in regards to its new recreational centre. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was at the Calgary Stampede over the weekend. He says there is a way to grow the economy while protecting the environment at the same time.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. New regulations took effect today that are designed to help airline passengers. Airlines now have to reimburse anyone bumped from a flight up to $2,400. For those passengers whose luggage is lost or damaged, they can also receive up to $2,100. The regulations also force airlines to give updates and let passengers know their rights if their flight has been delayed or cancelled. Both Air Canada and Porter Airlines asked the Federal Court of Appeal to quash the new rules, which they say violate international standards. Federal Transport Minister Marc Garneau said he was shocked by Canadian Airlines wanting to do away with the new rules.
I was surprised, in fact, a bit disappointed that the airlines should come out challenging something that is fundamental, which is passenger rights. As you know, it will be before the court, so I'm not going to comment about it any further. But we feel that we have done our homework very, very carefully in consultation with the airlines and with other stakeholders, and we feel that the passenger rights that we've put in place are going to stand up and that they're very fair to both passengers and to the airlines.
There's a group called Air Help that fights for travelers to get compensation for delayed or canceled flights. Legal advisor Crystal Irotakritu says when it comes to offering passengers compensation, the #1 airline is not Canadian.
Every year, Air Help is putting together its Air Help Airline Score, where we list the best airlines in terms of punctuality, in terms of claim compensation processing. The best airline this year is Qatar Airlines. And in Canada, Air Canada, WestJet, and Air Transat were on the average. So there is still room for improvement for the three big Canadian carriers.
Migrant workers may have found a new path to permanent residency in Canada thanks to a new 3-year immigration experiment. The pilot project is getting support from many in the employment industry, but not so much for migrant rights groups. Over the last several years, industries like mushroom farming, fruit picking, and meat cutting have relied on seasonal temporary foreign workers due to labor shortages. The new project, which launched on Friday, aims to attract and retain migrant workers by giving them the opportunity to become permanent residents. The strawberry U-pick season has started at R&S Farms in McGrath. Owner Sherilyn Lowry says it's a great way to get your kids away from those electronic devices.
We invite and encourage families to come. We like children to come and pick, and you can bring your whole family and friends and come and pick as much as you want. Right now we have strawberries, but the June bearers will go off in just a week or so, and then the everbearing can come on full blast until hard frost in October. We can pick strawberries for Halloween sometimes. And the Saskatoons are coming on right now. Some people call those sarvice berries. We will have choke cherries and raspberries that will be on probably next week is the raspberries. And we also have Evans cherries. Those are the baking cherries, the big red ones.
Because of the size of R&S Farms, Lowry says staff see a lot of people visiting the fields daily during the picking season. Lowry has high hopes for warm weather to continue the ripening process. The Lethbridge Police Service received approval from the Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General authorizing community peace officers who graduated from cadet training late last month to carry out their duties.
We fully support the Chief. We've passed resolutions as part of the budget process. We thank the Chief for his innovative suggestions. From a council perspective, the budget and financing of safe police services, safe and effective police services are important. It's a challenge for us to do that within the context of current taxes, and certainly our residents are concerned about ongoing tax increases. So we did ask the Chief to be innovative, to come forward with programs. This is the first police service in Alberta to implement the Peace Officer program, and it has the full support of the Alberta government.
Spearman adds that some of the benefits are that the CPO is more financially viable, that can focus on issues that the community have identified in the downtown core. Lethbridge Police issued 61 traffic and liquor violations during the Street Wheelers weekend. Most of the offenses were speeding and stunting. In addition, police laid out several impaired driving charges. Last year, 179 tickets were dished out, so the numbers were considerably smaller this year. Redcliffe RCMP have made an arrest in connection with a hit and run on a cyclist. Police say last Monday around 9 p.m., a cyclist was hit on the Trans-Canada Highway just east of Medicine Hat. Another motorist noticed the male cyclist lying on the side of the road and called 911. The cyclist was airlifted to Calgary Hospital, where he remains with life-threatening injuries. 2 occupants of a pickup truck were seriously hurt when their vehicle collided with a train on Friday night. RCMP say the truck was trying to cross an uncontrolled crossing located near the Brooks Aqueduct late last week. The 21-year-old driver was taken to Brooks Hospital with serious injuries, while a 17-year-old female passenger was flown to the Foothills Hospital in Calgary and is currently in stable condition. The investigation into the crash continues. The town of Coaldale is looking for more input to develop their new recreation center. It is being built to coincide with the new high school on the northwestern end of the community. Around 800 people responded to the last survey in 2018, with the most saying the best option was to build an indoor multi-use recreation facility. Town officials say they now are deciding what will go inside of the facility.
There's lots of room for expansion, but initially we were looking at other joint projects, and they included like pickleball courts and the a walking running track kind of a thing, and multi-use kind of a facility, perhaps basketball court or field sports type thing. We're going to architectural, we're doing a request for architects to come forward and then hopefully deal with that. And then in the fall, we want to engage the community on getting the fine points on what the community would like to see in there. It might be all of what I just said, or they might say, hey, we would like to have this other element in there that we haven't even thought about yet.
Around $10 million has been budgeted for the total project. Consultations are expected to last the rest of the year. It's that time of year again when artists, buskers, and bands take to the stage in Fort Macleod. The South Country Fair is celebrating its 33rd anniversary. Organizers of the event are busy setting up for this weekend's festivities. The festival attracts about 2,000 people annually from across Alberta and BC.
Lethbridge, Calgary, Edmonton. We draw from other places too. Grand Prairie. I talked to a fellow one time. This was a destination. He brought his family to South Country Fair, and when it was done, he turned around and they went home.
Yes, it starts Friday. Stage kicks off at 5 p.m. And then runs every day all the way through until Sunday around 6:30. And we've got 27 different musical performing acts. We've got poets. We've got awareness workshops. We've got instructional workshops if you want to learn how to play the ukulele, if you want to learn how to build some amazing product for your body or your skin out of natural ingredients. Pretty much anything you can think of, we've got something going on for.
For more information or tickets, be sure to visit southcountryfair.com. Thousands of Canadians suffer from autoimmune diseases when the immune system attacks the body. You can include Dr. Krista Coombs in that group. She knows firsthand how to help those who suffer from Hashimoto's because she has it herself. Dr. Coombs explained to BCN's Paul Arthur how she likes to empower others to find various treatment options.
Try to empower patients every day to do the things that are in their control, that they don't need a prescription for, they don't need even supplements for usually, or any therapy. Things that they can do every day, like improving quality of sleep, taking their stress down a notch, shifting perspectives. Food therapy is absolutely essential.
So would that be the number one kind of?
Well, sleep's pretty up there. Sleep? Yeah, sleep, because that's when you regenerate, and the gut really heals a lot in the nighttime while you're sleeping.
Catch the full interview with Paul Arthur and Dr. Coombs discussing the best way of dealing with autoimmune diseases coming up in the second half of our show. Firefighters were called to the Calgary Tower on Friday night after 8 people were trapped in an elevator. Officials say a cable on one of the elevators broke and the lift stopped about 12 stories up. Firefighters used a harness to pull the passengers up through the elevator scuttle hatch and then lower them down through the hatch of a second elevator. Fortunately, no one was injured in the incident. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was at the Calgary Stampede over the weekend. He says the only way to get projects like the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion built is by finding a compromise between growing the economy and protecting the environment.
We made a commitment to do things differently, a commitment to do things the right way, which means, yes, taking a leadership on environmental issues, taking a leadership on building partnerships with Indigenous peoples on the long road to reconciliation. Neither one of them are easy, neither one of them are unanimous in terms of support. But we believe that not only it's the right way to get big projects built, but it's the only way.
The governor of Louisiana says he's extremely grateful that Tropical Depression Storm Barry had not caused the disastrous floods that were forecast. John Bell Edwards did, however, urge residents to be cautious as they ventured outside.
Much of the southern portion of the state is still experiencing heavy rainfall that could lead to flash flooding, and we're at an elevated risk for tornadic activity. The rainfall totals that we can expect for much of Louisiana over the next 24 hours are about 2 to 4 inches, and in southwest Louisiana, sort of centered around Lafayette, the rainfall totals over the next 24 hours could get to 4 to 6 inches. This was a storm, obviously, that could have played out very, very differently. We leaned forward. We were prepared for the risks, the threats that had been forecasted. And again, we're thankful that the worst case scenario did not happen.
Now here's some dramatic footage of a rescue. The U.S. Coast Guard released video of a helicopter crew rescuing a 77-year-old man and his dog. They were trapped after floodwaters from Tropical Storm Barry inundated southern Louisiana. French President Emmanuel Macron oversaw the annual Bastille Day celebrations, which this year showcased European defense cooperation. As part of the celebration, 69 planes, 39 helicopters, and 4,000 troops participated. Macron hosted a lunch at the Élysée Palace with other European leaders, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Amid a room full of men inside of NASA's firing room in the liftoff of Apollo 11 sat Joanne Morgan. Morgan, who is now 78, began working at NASA in 1958 and made her primetime debut as the first female launch controller on July 16, 1969. Here she is with her amazing story.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine.
During the Apollo 11 mission, my role was at launch control. And I'd already been working there for almost 10 years. Getting to work in the firing room was pretty exciting. The firing room is where the managers and the test conductors and engineers and technicians are gathered. There are close to 500 people. They're in one room together, and they're literally locked in there in that room and focused on completing the mission. The discovery of the Van Allen belt, that very much intrigued me, and my brain was like, the amount of learning that's out there is going to be enormous, and I want to be in on it. I want to be part of it. And that was where I was coming from. So I was a inadvertent trailblazer, because that was something I saw I wanted to do, and it didn't occur to me when I first applied to be an engineer's aide that the ad for the job said student. It didn't say boy, and I was a good student. I made A's, and I love math and science. I was used to being the only woman in the room. The number one thing is do your job, get your work done, be highly competent. There's a lot of progress we can continue to make, and I hope that young women will not be afraid. I mean, you know, I'm an ordinary woman, and I just happen to like solving problems, but you know, start with puzzles and then do the math and then learn equations and then quadratic equations and calculus and just learn to do it, and you'd be surprised at where you can go and how much fun. I look back on my career and I think I never had a dull day at work. I hope we don't see pictures anymore with a lone woman in a sea of men. I'm hoping that pictures now show lots of women working in these kind of technical situations.
It'll be kind of a mixed bag this week. Rain, then more sunshine's on the way. Complete weather details are coming up. Another beautiful summer-like day in the Windy City again. Tonight, a low-pressure system rolls in, bringing clouds and showers in a low near 12. Tomorrow, more rain off and on with a high near 22. Wednesday, the rain should taper off, and we should see a high near 24. Thursday, more showers with the mercury dropping to 19. The sun returns on Friday with the temperature increasing to 21. Saturday, a few degrees warmer at 24. Sunday, even hotter with a high near 27 expected. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 and an average low of 11. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1996 at 35 degrees, and the record low was 2 in 1999. Sunrise was at 5:40, sunset at 9:35. Looking at the national forecast for tomorrow now, a chance of showers in Victoria with a high near 23. Sun mixed with cloud and a high near 22 for Vancouver. Thunder showers and 18 is on tap for Calgary on Tuesday. A slight chance of showers and 20 degrees for Edmonton. Thunder showers and 23 for Regina. A few showers and 21 degrees for Saskatoon tomorrow. Winnipeg had a heat warning today. Tomorrow just a few clouds and a high near 25. A risk of thunder showers and 31 for Toronto tomorrow. Expect 30 with light rain in Ottawa. Some isolated showers and 29 is in the forecast for Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton will be mainly sunny and 30. Halifax will also have sunshine at 29. Charlottetown will be mainly sunny and 26. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect drizzle and a high near 16 tomorrow. Our province's new government announced consultations for replacing the previous NDP government's farm workplace legislation. Agriculture Minister Devin Tereshan says he plans to meet with farmers to develop legislation to replace Bill 6. The legislation brought in employment and safety standards for farms and made farm workers eligible for workers' compensation. The UCP argued the previous government did not properly consult before bringing in the law, making it hard for farms and ranches to survive. An online survey is available to members of the public looking to share their views and will be open until the end of August. If you're looking to purchase a home in Lethbridge, now would be a good time to do it. The Lethbridge and District Association of Realtors says it is a buyer's market and there's quite a bit of inventory to choose from compared to other parts of the province.
In the province, we do see that the inventory levels have eased a little bit, but here in Lethbridge, they're still at 7 months. So when you translate that into, what has sold, for the month of June, so just this past month, we sold 276 properties. So that's slightly less than this time last year when we sold 290 homes. But when we look at the year-to-date sold, you could call it even, but we're just 0.2% higher than last year's.
The average price in the first half of 2019 was $226,000. That number is slightly above the same period in 2018. Contract talks between the United Auto Workers Union and the three big automakers are kicking off, with the union being a little more aggressive than in years past.
I've never made the distinction between hourly and salary. I feel like we're all part of one family here. I've always felt that way. I'll always feel that way. We're going to have some, tough issues. We always do. We're going to have disagreements. We always do. But in the end, we always try and do what's right for our company.
Brother Gary Jones.
So today I come here with a message for my brothers and sisters. Ford Motor Company has seen growth and significant profitability since the 2015 negotiations. And I've heard it loud and clear at every Ford plant and local I visit. They expect to share in the profits for their hard work and dedication that they have made possible. So I'm here today to say loud and clear, with this year's negotiations, we will halt the race to the bottom. We will protect our work, our jobs, and our way of life.
China's economic growth sank to its lowest level in 26 years in the first quarter ending in June. Economists say it is adding pressure to Chinese leaders as they fight a tariff war with the United States. Recent stats show the world's second largest economy shrank 0.2% to 6.2% over the previous year. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed last month to resume negotiations that has battered exporters on both sides. Economists warn their truce is fragile because they still face the same disputes that caused talks to break down in May. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, new regulations took effect today that are designed to help airline passengers. Airlines now have to reimburse anyone bumped from a flight up to $2,400. For those passengers whose luggage is lost or damaged, they can also receive up to $2,100. Autoimmune disease is when the immune system attacks your own body. Up next, BCN's Paul Arthur chats with Dr. Krista Coombs, who has advice on how to best treat the disease. What's interesting is that Dr. Coombs has Hashimoto's herself and discusses some of her biggest challenges. That interview is coming up. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Heritage Acres Farm Museum is hosting its annual Quilt and Flower Show Saturday, July 20th from 1 to 5 p.m. Entry fee to the museum will be $10 per person, and those 16 and under are free. If you have a quilt you'd like to enter, contact Joe Baker at 403-627-2688. And for flower exhibits, call Barb Tomic at 403-627-3388. If you're a woman who's interested in improving your health, come to the Refresh Urban Retreat on July 20th at Youth One in Lethbridge. Enjoy a full day with top nutritionists, physiotherapists, kinesiologists, and more. Registration deadline is July 18th, and funds raised through this event will go to Youth One. To register, visit freetobehealthy.org. The Willow Creek Gospel Music Jamboree is taking place July 26th to the 28th in Granham, Alberta. Come out and enjoy live gospel music by the Liberty Quartet, Rosette, Prairie George, the Fort Macleod Alliance Worship Group, and more. Plus, Daryl Jams will make a return as MC. For more information, visit gospelmusicjamboree.com. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
More and more people are looking for more natural treatments for illnesses, or perhaps combining natural treatments with conventional medicine. Joining me in the studio today is Dr. Krista Coombs, Doctor of Traditional Chinese Medicine, registered acupuncturist, functional medicine practitioner, and owner of AcuPlus Wellness Clinic, which has been voted the best acupuncture practice in Lethbridge for the last 3 years in a row. So, way to go, Dr. Krista. Good to have you with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, today we're going to talk about a couple of interesting, challenging illnesses, hypothyroidism and also Hashimoto's disease. I don't know a lot about either, but can you tell us first of all about hypothyroidism?
Okay, so hypothyroidism is when your thyroid gland here in this area of your body starts to slow down, doesn't pump out enough hormone to satisfy body needs for metabolism, growth, fertility, hormone development, and so on, temperature control.
Okay. And now you say that the main cause for hypothyroidism is autoimmunity. Yeah. And apparently this ties in as well with Hashimoto's. But now before we get into the actual autoimmune causes here, apparently there are some other causes for hypothyroidism as well. You want to touch those first?
Yeah, for sure. You can have issues with the pituitary gland in the brain. So if there's a tumor there, that can cause problems with communication to the thyroid.
So one gland affects the other gland?
Absolutely. All your glands affect all glands.
Okay.
Everything is interwoven. Everything works together. So the thyroid gland is not on its own. It's not solo. So yes, the pituitary gland asks the thyroid gland to produce TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, and that hormone then tells the thyroid to pump out more T4, which is a hormone. Okay. It's a storage hormone. It's not useful really on its own. And then that T4 throughout the body then goes to the liver, muscles, and gut, and that's where most of it is converted to T3, which is the bioavailable hormone. And that goes inside the cells into the nucleus, tells the DNA to pump out certain proteins to work on metabolism, for hormone development, temperature control, mood, etc.
Okay.
It's pretty powerful.
Well, what are some of the symptoms of hypothyroidism?
Oh, there's stubborn weight gain when it's progressing. So stubborn weight gain, mood issues like depression in particular, anxiety, chronic pain can be a symptom, hair loss, very dry skin, but a lot of mental and emotional changes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Stunted growth, infertility.
All right. Now, again, it's tied in, you say, with hypothyroidism as well, and an autoimmune cause. So define, I guess, what would an autoimmune cause be?
Okay, but So the pituitary, I didn't finish that one,
Oh, it's
but
okay.
the
Sure,
pituitary gland is one of the ways that
Yeah.
you can have hypothyroidism. Trauma, so hit to the
Oh, you're
throat.
kidding.
Yeah, can trigger it.
Wow.
Yeah, low iodine. So if you live in an area in the world where there's chronically low iodine available, like it might not be in the soil.
So it's actually territorial? There's
Geographical, for sure.
Really?
You betcha. And if you have too much iodine, you can cause the opposite. You can cause hyperthyroidism. And so that's why we have to be very careful with supplementing with iodine. Even with hypothyroidism, you got to be very careful.
Okay.
Because you can throw them into a hyper state, which is pretty dangerous.
Okay.
But yeah, so for Hashimoto's, the estimate is currently at 95%. At least 95% of all hypothyroidism is caused by autoimmune attack against the thyroid. So the immune system, there's reasons why, but it starts to attack the thyroid gland and destroy it progressively over time. And so a lot of people are not diagnosed with hypothyroidism. They feel like, oh my gosh, I got all this weight gain, or I feel really off, I'm depressed, but I have no reasons to be, or my hair's falling out a bit, but the docs look at their TSH usually, and maybe TSH or T4 hormones, and they're normal still within the ranges set by the lab. And meanwhile, the immune response is attacking the thyroid, and until it gets to a tipping point where the thyroid can no longer support enough hormone production for the body's needs, they won't be able to find it on blood work unless they look for antibodies, like immune antibodies, that are attacking certain aspects of the thyroid.
So the normal conventional medicine approach to this would do some blood tests, and sometimes they might be able to find it, but you're saying it kind of hides there.
Well, they can find it any time, but they don't usually test for it. So what happens is, this happened to me. I went in, I was starting to have this stubborn weight gain. I was really struggling with emotions and just lots of things in life, and my thyroid hormones looked fine. And until I started digging and forcing somebody to test me for the autoimmune markers, I didn't know. And that could be up to 10 years prior. You could be having attacks against your thyroid.
Now, we should let our viewers know. So you actually personally have struggled with Hashimoto's, right?
Yeah.
And wow, okay. So you know now exactly what to look for.
I sure do.
from personal experience, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, you say this is typically caused by autoimmune. So the body's attacking itself, autoimmune, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
But I mean, what are the root causes, though? I mean, is it? I know you'd mentioned a three-legged stool theory, right? And I forget exactly what it was. I think part of it was the environment and maybe genetics as well, right?
So
can you explain that to us?
Yeah, you bet. Dr. Alessio Fasano, brilliant researcher, did a lot of research in the last number of years on celiac disease in particular, but we're looking at it in terms of all the autoimmune diseases, which is like well over 100 different autoimmune diseases. And so he came up with the three-legged stool theory. And you can add to it a little bit, but the fundamentals are, if you have a stool and it only has one leg, it'll never stay up, right? So if you have the genetics, you can have genetic predisposition. It's not necessarily genes for a particular autoimmune disease, but you can have a mix that in relation, when they're all turned on, can lead to this type of thing. So it could it could affect the immune system, or
leaves you vulnerable. Your genes leave you vulnerable
Absolutely.
to it. Okay.
So then you have the environmental triggers. So you've got, the genetics like a gun, and then the environmental trigger is pulling the trigger on the gun.
So what kind of environmental kind of things
So
could
the
cause
environmental trigger could be surgeries, medications, toxins in the environment, which we're bombarded by, like in plastics, cosmetics, nail polishes, sprays on your food. It's pretty intense. So some people are more genetically susceptible than other people. Even anesthetic from surgeries and the trauma from surgeries. Physical trauma, so accidents can do it. Even TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, can trigger autoimmune response. Molds, parasite or bacterial or viral infections, especially in the gut. But even the virus Epstein-Barr, which is the monovirus, or some of the herpes viruses, they lay latent. Epstein-Barr in particular can lay latent in the thyroid, it is thought, and can be one of the things that trigger the immune system to go and attack the virus, and in the end the thyroid gets attacked, and then the immune system starts attacking aspects of the thyroid. And
all right. Now, are there any kind of cures, treatments that, with conventional medicine for Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism?
Well, yeah, and that brings us to the third leg of the stool,
okay.
right?
Did we miss
so,
one? Okay.
Yeah, we did. So the environmental, so the stool will stay up a little bit, it'll wobble, so that can be going on for 20 years. But then as you age and as you maybe abuse yourself with food and so on and have more infections and things and take more antibiotics and whatnot, as you get more hyperpermeable gut lining, that's the third leg of the stool. And once that's happening and consistently happening, you have the stool standing up. That's autoimmune is on, it's blaring, it's roaring, it's causing progressive damage. So what we try to do in terms of healing tools or managing tools is I teach people all the time how to start healing the gut lining, how to manage some of the toxin environmental triggers to reduce the load so your body can handle more of what it's around on a regular basis. But food triggers, 75-80% of the immune system lines mouth to bum. That's incredible. That means that everything you take in, food and drink, is potentially going to be a trigger to the immune system. So if it's already turned on and having some trouble, it's easy to have reactions to undigested food or poor quality food or lots of the toxins and microbes that are associated with that. And then everything gets really disrupted. I kind of liken it to your gut is like a big rainforest. It starts out pretty awesome, but if you start clear cutting because you're not taking care of it, and you got patches clear cut, even when you start to rehabilitate it, if you're doing a good job, it's still never going to be like it used to be. But it'll still be better than it was, and so you can slow the progression of an autoimmune response right away, just with food. Things that I try to empower patients every day to do the things that are in their control, that they don't need a prescription for, they don't need even supplements for usually, or any therapy. Things that they can do every day, like improving quality of sleep, taking their stress down a notch, shifting perspectives. Food therapy is absolutely essential.
So would that be the number one kind of?
Well, sleep's pretty up there.
Sleep?
Yeah, sleep, because that's when you regenerate, and the gut really heals a lot in the nighttime while you're sleeping.
So sleep.
Sleep.
Just the sleep itself. It sounds so simple.
I know,
it
but
does.
it isn't. And same with gut healing. It sounds so simple, but it isn't.
But literally, if you are not sleeping well, that's going to hinder your recovery big time.
From anything. So that puts you at risk for heart disease, obesity, all kinds of autoimmune diseases.
You know, I had it right when I was a teenager. Mom, I'm sorry you missed it. Sleeping in was good for me.
Well, you're growing a lot back then. That's when your thyroid's really useful. Hey.
Okay. Now, you had Hashimoto's yourself. So were you able to, I don't know, is there a cure for Hashimoto's at all? Or is this kind of something you kind of have to live with and you can make it much easier to live with? Is that kind of where it's at?
So you learn to manage
and
slow the progression.
Yeah. Okay, so
there's no cure for any autoimmune disease. MS, lupus.
Okay, anything that's autoimmune, basically there's no cure.
Nobody knows yet.
Okay, so how long did it take you to figure out? I guess, what kind of timeline are we taking? So if somebody came in to see you, for example, and I know that would probably vary depending on the severity of,
and the age,
right? Okay, so a number of factors. Is there a range, I guess, of time that somebody would be looking at as far as, getting things under control and living a decent life again? Because if this is really serious, right? Your life probably...
It is pretty serious.
Yeah.
What happens is the docs will give you medication. They'll give you hormone and say, oh, well, now your numbers are in range. You should be feeling better. But often we don't feel much better because the autoimmune attack is still happening. So once it's happening against the thyroid, it's probably happening other places. The likelihood of getting another autoimmune disease is extremely high if you're not managing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's progressive.
Oh, that would be not a good thing. Okay.
It really isn't fun. But once you understand what's going on, more of what's going on, and you start making some changes, I've seen people change, even in myself, within the first week, they changed their diet.
Really? That quickly?
I swear to you.
Wow.
When I got my numbers back a number of years ago, I was 43, so it was almost 4 years ago. When I got my numbers back, my antibodies for some of the antibodies were over 1,200, which is pretty high. I've seen them higher, but that's pretty high. And within 6 weeks of testing, they went down to 44. And you want to be under 34 to be in a remission state.
Yeah, that's
so that was just one of the antibodies, but still, that was really quick. Within the first week, though, the reason I had gone to get testing at all was because it wasn't really the weight gain. It was more I couldn't put a sentence together anymore. It was, and I live in my brain. I love to study and use my brain.
Wow, okay.
And so I said, this can't happen.
Yeah.
And within the first week of changing my diet, I was fine.
That is very
I was like a
interesting.
different person, like the light switch just
What kind of foods would you say? I mean, again, I know it's going to be, somewhat specific to each individual, but generally speaking, are there certain foods that you should avoid if you're dealing with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's?
So there's a lot of research coming out in the last probably 5 years for sure that's really supporting the foods I'm going to tell you about to remove because of a lot of different reasons. I mean, there's this huge discussion, but the gluten molecule is particularly difficult.
Okay.
So gluten as a protein is very challenging for the body to digest. All the lectins are.
So
gluten.
grains, things like that, that's a no-no?
Yeah, generally.
Okay.
Certainly the glutinous ones. Not all grain have gluten and not all pseudograins have gluten, but they're very similar in structure. So if you have an immune response to one aspect of it, it's cross-reactive. They're all going to trigger.
Okay.
But what happens is gluten is known to cause the gut junctions, the cell junctions, to become leaky, keeps them open longer, so then things can get through that shouldn't be, like toxins. If you don't, if you have a lot of sprayed food and stuff, and pieces of bacteria can go through, and then that triggers the immune response. So, and that happens in anybody, whether you have autoimmune or not. But it's more. It's probably a genetic
be more
thing.
evident.
It's more evident.
It makes you more susceptible. So
that one and casein in dairy. So
dairy.
The main protein in dairy.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Those are the top two.
Wow, that's very interesting. Okay. Running out of time here. I know you mentioned sleep was a big thing, avoiding stress as well. What would your advice be briefly here to viewers who might suspect that they have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's?
Or they have hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say have more comprehensive testing. So go beyond TSH, T4, T3.
Right.
I would have TPO antibodies and TG, which is thyroglobulin antibodies, tested, both tested. And sometimes I'll see somebody has really low TPO antibodies, it's thyroperoxidase, but their TG antibodies are through the roof. So it's still Hashimoto's. Anybody who's suffered miscarriages and does have some of these symptoms I've talked about, you have that evaluated because you'll continue very likely to have miscarriages. And so I help a lot of ladies who have that, and they come see me and we find out, I get their doctor to do some comprehensive testing, or I can send them to the hospital for some testing.
Okay.
And then we help reverse that or manage it, get their antibodies down so that they lose weight, they just feel great. I have so many stories.
Yeah.
And then we can try and
then
let them have babies.
Yeah,
they're more secure, then they can have babies.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Krista. Much appreciated.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. I hope it helps other people who have hypothyroidism learn that it's Hashimoto's, because almost always it is.
Well, that's what we want to do. We want to help people. So.
And then there's something they can do. Yeah.
All right. Dr. Krista Coombs, our guest here today. Again, acupuncturist and traditional Chinese medicine specialist, or doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. And you can see her at AcuPlus Wellness Clinic, acupluswellness.com.
Christianity has been around for over 2,000 years now, but how much does the average person really know about its history? Does it even matter? Joining me now from Edmonton is Ted Byfield, a well-known conservative Canadian journalist who founded the Alberta Report, BC Report, and the Western Report news magazines. He's also the general editor of the 12-volume history series, The Christians, Their First 2,000 Years. Ted, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much. I feel very welcome to be there.
How much does the average Canadian Christian really know about the history of Christianity, Ted?
Close to nothing, but then it's also true that he knows very little about the history of anything else. The subject has been terribly, what's the word, I guess you'd have to say downtrodden in the public school system, because the great philosopher of the modern school system, Dewey, thought that history was dangerous because it sets up hero figures, and we don't want people worshiping hero figures. So people don't know much of any history, least of all Christianity.
Now, can you give our viewers a brief look into how the Western world was influenced by Christianity?
Well, what happened was that there were three sort of sources of Christianity, I guess you could say. The religious source of it came from the ancient Jews. I mean, Christianity in that sense really is a Jewish religion. The legal part of it, the law and the respect for the law, came from the Romans, and the ideas of government came from the Greeks. And in the early Middle Ages, the Christian church put all three of those sources together, and it emerges in modern history as Western philosophy. And this is the Western world, but its origins are those three. And the Christians, their role was to bring those three together and to make it into one general philosophy. And that's the one we've been operating on for the last maybe 300 years, until very recently when we began to throw it out.
Now, tell me about the persecution of the early church and what it went through, and compared to today's persecution.
Well, first of all, the early church suffered persecution because it fell afoul of the Roman government. And they were pretty efficient on everything they did, but they couldn't wipe it out. And that bothered them because that meant there must be something here they didn't understand. And that misunderstanding went through 300 years of, the Christians went through nearly 300 years of active persecution until one emperor said, look, these are the best guys we've got. They're our best soldiers, they're our best citizens, they tell the truth, they take care of poor people. Why are we persecuting? We should be supporting them. And that was the great change in the 4th century, which ended the persecution by the Roman state. But whether we could say that modern persecution is the equivalent, there's two kinds of modern persecution going on. There's the kind that occurs some places in the Asian world, India occasionally, and in modern China, in which vast numbers of people are jailed, locked up, or killed. And then there's in our society, there's people call it persecution because we keep getting called names, bigots, and all the rest of it. But, you know, sticks and stones will hurt my bones, but names will never hurt me. We make a big deal of it, but it's really a miscall to say what we're going through in persecution, because compared with other people's are going through and have gone through, this doesn't count as anything.
So Ted, let's look back on the Middle Ages and the Crusades. This is always a point of contention. Islam was advancing quickly. So how did the Christians respond to this? And was it even justified?
Well, first of all, Islam was expanded by the sword. And most of its acquisitions made beginning the 8th century and so on were made by conquering peoples and imposing a Muslim structure upon their government and their society. And that offensive against Christianity has characterized Islam for many, many centuries. It's not new, and we seem to think of it as new. The Crusades were an attempt to recover by conquest what we'd lost by conquest through the Muslims. And they were, in effect, a counterattack. And they didn't quite work, you know. And they failed. In the end, the Muslim state was as powerful as ever. What is working against Islam, and always has, is the idea of mercy being demonstrated visibly and effectively by Christians towards other people. And that impresses Muslims, because there is at the heart of Muslims a very, very good thing. Their religion does not extol it sufficiently, but it's there. And I think all of us know Muslims who are horrified by some of the things the radical Muslims are doing. So we must be careful when we attack Islam, to be sure that we make that distinction, because a lot of Muslims they're just awed. I can't believe that they're doing their own people are doing these things. They have been doing them a long time, but they still don't like it. And those people are hurt more than the persecuted in a way, you know. They hate to see their religion being made into this.
Ted, let's talk about the Reformation years. Now we think of Martin Luther and John Calvin. What were the major issues of the Reformation?
Well, the central issue was what's the authority behind the church? Who can say this is Christian and have some be able to justify that statement? And is the church expressed in the Bible? Yes. Is the Bible the final authority? Some would say yes. Others would say it's a final authority, but not the only one. But the argument was who's boss? That's always the argument. And that to the Catholics, the structure of the papacy was the essential authority. And to the Protestants, the work of the Holy Spirit within the souls of men was the essential authority. And in a way, it's too bad because there are ways of bringing those two things together. Because we did not bring them together, we've gone through an awful lot of unnecessary pain, so that there's nothing that either side can boast about.
Now, certainly the Gutenberg press and the availability of the Bible in a language everyday people can understand must have had a very profound effect on the world. Let's talk a bit about that.
Well, that obviously did. There's no question about it. You see, the church was afraid of the Bible in a sense because all kinds of weird constructs can be made out of the Bible, which they realized. So they kept the authority for the Bible, the interpretation of the Bible, in the papacy to prevent that from happening. But what they also prevented from happening was an awful lot of very good things that the Protestants had fulfilled, so that the unity of the church was never accomplished. And I think more in the last 25 years has been done towards bringing Protestants and Catholics together than what's happened since the Reformation. Why is it happening? Because secularism is taking over everything, and it doesn't like either one of us. So we're being thrust together by our foes, and that's a good thing.
How has Christianity really helped bring about democracy?
Christianity has ultimately regarded the individual person as the ultimate criterion of heaven or hell within that person. So that Christianity has always imposed, or rather assigned, a great importance to the individual person. This is very out of character today because the left in our political system continually divides us into groups. You know, I'm a white male, you're something else, something, and so on. Everybody has to have a group. And they believe the group is more important than the individual, and the Christian says no. And that difference, I think, defines the difference, our differences between governments and Christianity, which are arising. And as those differences arise, and we see ourselves being, you can't say persecuted, but we're certainly being penalized for our religion in various ways, this is pulling us together. So that I think maybe in the next 25 or 30 years, the issues will still be there on authority, but there'll be so many joint projects between the Catholics and Protestants that the difference between them is just beginning to disappear. I hope that, and pray. I think we should all be praying for that. Anyway.
And Ted, in the last century, it's been interesting to see how faith has waned in much of the West, but it seems to have exploded in many developing nations. Why do you think that is?
It's happened because of the philosophies underlying the West, which eroded our religions and still do. Those philosophies have never really been tried in Asia, for instance, in Africa, so that the thing that's new to them really is Christianity. So what we're seeing, and it's happened before, is a change in the Christian world. There was a time when the sort of center of Christian activity was in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and then it changed gradually, and it went over to the United States and the Americas. I think it's changing now and going to Asia and Africa. And we may see if you had said in the, say, 4th century there's a little collection of mud huts on the bank of the Seine River, and they're calling it Paris. I would say, if someone were to say, yeah, but that's going to be the cultural capital of the world, they say, yeah, right. But the same thing could be going on. We could be looking at some place in Central Africa that becomes the center of our civilization. That's the center of civilization has tended to follow Christianity, or maybe Christianity has followed the center, but they stay together. And we're casting it aside now. And we'll lose our authority as we do it, our moral authority.
You know what I think is fascinating as well, Ted, is that when I was a kid growing up and attending Sunday school, I always heard stories of missionaries being sent to different countries in Africa, and now those same African nations are sending missionaries here to North America.
Correct, and that's happened long. That happened in Western Europe, for instance, and from the 6th to around the 11th century, missionaries from Ireland in particular and other barbarian places. Some unkind people think Ireland is still a barbarian place. I'm part Irish, so I can say that. But those Irish missionaries came back into Europe and reconverted it to Christianity. And a book came out about 10 years ago, How the Irish Saved Civilization. Well, it wasn't quite true, but it made for good reading for the Irish.
We'll bring that up again on St. Paddy's Day next year. Now, where do you see Christianity headed over the next couple of decades?
I think there'll be a transfer of central activity and authority from the modern Western nations to Africa and Asia. And I think the Christians, churches, maybe they'll be able to call themselves a Christian church again by that, will come forward very, very rapidly in those parts of the world. And when they do, that will change the center of civilization with it. We won't see it, but our grandchildren might see the beginning of it. Well, we're seeing it now. China's coming on economically. And as usual, Christians are under severe persecution, but that always seems to precede a major gain in Christianity. When Constantine approved Christianity, he said, as I mentioned, but they're our best people. Why are we persecuting them? The Chinese are finding this, though, too. They're honest, for one thing. So what they're trying to figure out now is how do we get their morality without getting their religion? Not possible.
So, Ted, in your opinion, how can the church in Western civilization become more relevant and more of a bright, shining light in a dark world?
I think the main thing that we've got to do is to teach the faith better than we have been doing it. As people learn the history of Christianity, and as people learn its current problems and the fights we're now going through, we've been going through conflict ever since the 1st century. But as people come to absorb that, they get taken up by it, and you'll see a swing back even in our society towards Christianity. But as I said, the center will be elsewhere.
Interesting. Ted Byfield, the general editor of the 12-volume history series, The Christians, Their First 2,000 Years. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity of talking to you about it.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.